Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the 5th episode of Den of Sin. Full disclosure, we have tried filming this episode already, but we were having severe technical difficulties. So
we
this
really
is our
meant to bring it to you sooner.
Yeah, I know, because we know that you're waiting on pins and needles. But we're happy to do it. We're gonna do our best. Hopefully today there's no technical snafus. But yeah, I'm excited about this episode today. I feel like I've enjoyed each one we've done almost more and more. And I think today we've got a really interesting topic. We've got our first actress or actor. We have our first actor. That was also a point on the last podcast of the last time we recorded this.
It's our second actor.
It's our second actor. Yes, our first. Yeah, that's what it said. I shouldn't make that distinction. And again, ladies and gentlemen, we all still have learning to do. I don't want to genderize. Anyways, let's get on to it. We're going to talk about the amazing actor Jamie Lee Curtis, who's I've been a fan of for a long time. As a horror fan, obviously, I've been a fan for the majority of my life. And yeah, I think she's a great actor to sort of get into right now. We had already planned on doing this episode. Some of her films are currently in the news, or sort of some updates to some very anticipated films that she's doing. The rest of the Halloween trilogy. Devin, you've heard about this, of course, right?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, so unfortunately, for everybody that's been waiting for those movies, waiting to once they announced that it would be David Gordon Green was going to do a trilogy to really wrap up the story of Laurie Strode. People were really excited, but unfortunately, it's been pushed back a year. They've both been pushed back a year because they want to save them for the theater. They don't want them to be VOD, and obviously, there's a lot of fans that are like bummed. There's just like anything. There's fans who are taking it personally because the sense of fucking entitlement in fandom has gotten way out of control. But I mean, it's the sad news. But I would rather see it in the theater than see it on VOD myself. Like I'd like to see it in a theater with a group of fans. So I mean, I'm not too bummed. I mean, I think this is a crazy time to live in, and an especially crazy time for movies. So do you have specific feelings on it, Devin? Were you even looking forward to them?
Oh, I'm definitely looking forward to them. I've loved all the Halloween movies. Let's go ahead and just say we're going to dedicate this next little block to the Halloween movies because that's
of course we have
really, to. It's a natural point to start with Jamie Lee Curtis.
Wait, we're not going to start with Quincy MD?
Or we could. What was the other one that she did? It wasn't Petticoat Junction, but it was something like that.
Like that. Yeah.
It was like an Operation Petticoat. Operation
Petticoat. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. No, we're not going to go over that today.
No, we're going to start with Halloween.
Except to say that if she hadn't been fired from Operation Petticoat, she never would have auditioned for Halloween.
That's right.
So, but in keeping, just to wrap up what you were saying about the new movies being delayed, I'm in favor of it because I would really like to see them in the theater. And even if the theaters are open in October, I'm not entirely sure that I'm open to the theater.
No, exactly. I'm not going to the theater. No, same here.
I've waited so many years for good Halloweens to come out. I've waited decades for good Halloweens to come out. So another year is a bummer, but not anything that's going to keep me from it.
Yeah, I mean, I could technically say I've been waiting since Halloween 2 for a good...
Well,
which is not fair because I love Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. But yes. Exactly. I mean, I'll say a good Michael Myers Halloween movie because I think Season of the Witch is... Sometimes I like it more than even the first Halloween movie. That movie has a special place in my heart, despite some like pacing issues and some certain things. Like, I mean, anything with Tom Atkins in it is going to be something I adore anyways, but I think the movies, I think it's one of the most enjoyable movies of its era. And that's an era of nothing but amazing horror movies. But anyways, yeah, let's talk about some Halloween. Let's, Devin, when I first met you, if I'm not mistaken, I think the very first time I saw you walking across campus in high school, because we do go back that far. We didn't become friends till after high school, but I definitely knew of you.
Yes.
Because I think you were wearing an Evil Dead t-shirt, Evil Dead 2 t-shirt, I think.
It wouldn't surprise me. I owned a couple of them.
Yeah. I owned one as well. I think there was, when you're like, it's like being the funny kid in school or like, the best singer in school. And then you see somebody else who's like, almost like there's competition. You're sort of like, who's this joker think he is? But I immediately wanted to be your friend. I mean, legitimately, like so we didn't become friends until after high school. But I immediately was like, there's another like film nerd in this school. So yeah. But so I know you probably definitely have a long-standing relationship with Halloween. Was it a movie that you grew up with? Was it a movie that you cherished even at a young age?
100%. think the first time I ever saw it was probably on a Halloween night, on KTTV 11 or something like that.
Exactly. I think exactly the same. Yep.
And what's funny, I always thought I got to see this when I can go and rent it sometime, when I'm allowed to rent an R-rated movie, because I was sure that it was a lot gorier than what I was seeing. And it's not a particularly gory film.
No.
It's a class act. I don't have anything against gore, but I think it would have worked against Halloween and what Halloween was trying to do.
Yep.
And her as the final girl, as the quintessential final girl.
Yep.
Laurie Strode. Jamie Lee Curtis just nails it, because she does not. Yes, she's being victimized, and you do see her terrified, but she does not relent. She keeps on working towards getting Michael away from those kids and out of her house.
Absolutely. Yeah, let's get into this, because obviously I think, she's called a Scream Queen. I think she's more definitely, if you're putting a title on what her legacy is, I see her less as a Scream Queen and more, like it says, the quintessential final girl. The thing is, like, there's been a ton of great final girls in Scream cinema, tons. But from the start, there was something very special about Jamie Lee Curtis. First off, she was playing a three-dimensional character. Even as a 19-year-old girl, she was playing her as a fully realized three-dimensional character. And you said it perfectly. Like, she's scared. There's this almost unstoppable maniac trying to kill her, and like I said, the children in her care, the children she's babysitting. But again, she's a fighter, and even through her fear, she's fighting. And again, her fear is palpable. Like, it's a very authentic, real fear, and she does carry that movie. I mean, I almost called her Riff Randall.
Which one are you? PJ Souls.
PJ Souls, thank you. In my head, she'll always be Riff Randall. It's weird, but she's amazing. I love PJ Souls. Still doing horror conventions to this day. She's always a very lovely human being. I've gotten to meet her. Very good to her fans. Ton of great actors. Obviously, John Carpenter. Honestly, think the audience's ability to empathize with Laurie, and obviously Jamie Lee's performance, that made it stand. I mean, it could have been another lesser actress in that role, and it could have been a very forgettable drive-in movie. Obviously, Carpenter's direction is incredible. Obviously, the score is legendary. There's
the shape is legendary.
The shape is legendary. I mean, it's just a ton. And we could literally talk about the first Halloween for hours. I mean, going into every nook and cranny of the mythology and the history of the film, but ultimately, like, as far as I'm concerned, I remember, and it's weird, like, actresses are known, especially sometimes in horror, unfortunately, like, actresses are sort of judged by their looks. Jamie Lee Curtis, even at a young age, to me was I had a crush on her at a young age, but
I'll talk to that.
Yeah, I mean, and we'll get more into that as she grew into different roles. But she's very unique looking. She's, her parents were both
gorgeous,
beautiful people, yeah. But she's kind of unique looking. She has a very long face. But it's because she's so unique looking, and she has a very expressive face, that she sort of just stands out. So even in a crowd of people, she sort of stands out. So, I think that definitely played with her as well. But again, yeah, I mean, she starts off her film career with probably the most important career in her entire filmography, and one of the most important films in horror history. So starts her film career off with a bang. So
exactly.
Yeah. So
well, just kind of a fun fact here. I'm always full of those. The first Halloween was actually Alfred Hitchcock's favorite horror movie at the time of his death in '81.
I have heard that. Yes, I have.
Yes. Imagine being John Carpenter and finding out.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, it's funny that you said that, because I almost said when you were talking about gore that it's more of like a Hitchcock movie. It is more about, it's much more about suspense, and it's about using the darkness, using the shadows, using the contrast, but very suspenseful. I mean, I could definitely see why Carpenter would relate to it. But yeah, what a fucking compliment! Especially if you're a young filmmaker at that point, like John Carpenter. But knowing John Carpenter, he's probably very unfazed. He's probably very cool about it.
My guess, and this kind of covers John Carpenter in general, I think when he's around people, he'll act unfazed. But I bet when he gets home, he does his own little dance.
Yeah, exactly.
He's a geek just like the rest of us. And he learned from Hitchcock. He went to, I can't remember if it was USC or UCLA, but where he went to college, Hitchcock was a guest speaker. And of course, there's the Hitchcock connection in Jamie Lee Curtis. And
exactly.
Her mother, Janet Leigh, being the lead in Psycho. So there's,
Exactly.
and then Dr. Loomis is named after Sam Loomis in Psycho. So there's a lot of connections to Hitchcock within that movie. So it's to say that it was Hitchcock's favorite horror movie.
Yeah.
A, that means that movie really landed, and B, I'm willing to bet that John Carpenter did a happy dance when he heard that.
Yeah, for real, absolutely. I could definitely agree with that. But yeah, I think from there, like, we could talk about her involvement in the franchise, which did take a few years. There's a few years in there where she wasn't involved in the franchise, but I do feel like we need to quickly mention, before we go into the rest of the Halloween franchise, just the other horror movies that she sort of did at the time.
Sure, let's spread the Halloween out.
She was definitely following a formula in her career at that point.
Or they were feeding her a formula.
Yeah, exactly. And exactly. And she I don't think she's bitter about those films. But I knew she definitely has got a record saying she wanted to get out of there, and that's how she ended up going back into television and going back into doing Fish Called Wanda, or
Trading Places.
Trading Places first, exactly. But yeah, I mean, they definitely are not nearly as well loved or well known as Halloween. I honestly love the rest of The Fog is a classic in its own right. Another
John
Carpenter film, a movie I love. Prom Night isn't a flawless movie, but it is a great classic, almost more of a thriller than a horror movie, but it's very much in the slasher. And I think Terror Train is very underrated. I think Terror Train's a really fun movie. And we have to also talk about Coming Soon as well, because that was a movie I grew up watching all the time for some reason. I don't know if it was on HBO, but
it had to have been on HBO. I watched it about 100 times myself.
Yeah,
I think before I even knew who Jamie Lee Curtis was. Might have been the first thing I ever saw with her.
Very possible, actually, yeah. But yeah, definitely, I love her horror output. But let's talk more about so I'm going to go on record as saying not the biggest fan of the rest of, the Halloween like, it's funny because obviously I'm a huge horror fan. I love the big franchises, the big, Hollywood hit franchises in horror. I mean, giant fan of, the Nightmare on Elm Street, the Friday the 13th, big fan of the Hellraisers, even though God knows there's a ton of shitty ones of those. Far more shitty ones than good ones. But I think I was really bitter by the Halloween franchise because, the first one is so good and the second one is sort of just like the first one on coast. Like they just said, let's just but got some cool moments or whatever. But from there on out, I just couldn't get into the mythology, and the mythology changes and it becomes very fucking confusing. And by the time it gets to Resurrection, I'm just like, what is happening here? But
yeah, Halloween really became a bus with too many drivers. It was everybody trying to put in their 2 cents on who Michael Myers is and why is he unstoppable. And it's like, they're forgetting that the original was brilliant because he was just the boogeyman, and his face was not supposed to be seen. He was supposed to be blank slate. I think a lesser director would have put him in a crazy, spooky Halloween mask. No, they took a William Shatner mask, painted it white, cut the eye holes a little bit bigger, and said, "There we go. There's our guy." Well,
it was from a. It was Michael Shatner from a movie. It was
William Shatner from. I don't think it was Kingdom of the Spiders. It might have been.
No. It was. Oh God, I don't know why I'm blanking on the title, but like a schlocky.
Devil's Reign.
The Devil's Reign. Thank you. Exactly. So, but we're kind of diverging from Jamie Lee Curtis specifically, but just because she is basically essential to Halloween. Like, I think that was Rob Zombie's biggest mistake, was also like, I understand from the impulse of wanting to do a remake. Obviously, if you're going to do a remake, you don't want to be fucking Gus Van Sant remaking Psycho. You want to do something original, something that the first film didn't do. Unfortunately, everything he decided to do was the exact opposite of what made the first Halloween work. Trying to explain Michael Myers and turning him into some white trash hillbilly kid doesn't make it cooler. It makes it worse. So, and I think, again, it does prove the magic of what Carpenter, like, the intelligence he did to approach it, to know, like, this is working within limitations, which I think is some of the Jaws is a perfect example. Jaws is a great movie because Spielberg was forced to pull back his fucking instincts and work within the limitations and have to find creative ways to make that movie. If he had done what he'd wanted to do, it probably wouldn't have been the film we love, because his instinct is to sort of, show and not tell. And I guess in that regard, it's almost tell and not show. But anyways, I'm diverging too far from topic. But anyways, the rest of the Halloween franchise for me just don't hold up. There are ones in between that I like more than I do maybe another, but overall, it doesn't honestly get until the 2018 David Gordon Green where I truly enjoyed, like, from start to finish, a Halloween film. And it features Jamie Lee Curtis. And Jamie Lee Curtis is by far the best thing about the movie. She's the most interesting. Her performance is the most interesting. What they did with the character was genius. So, but yeah, Devin, I've talked for an hour and a half now. Why don't you go ahead and what are your feelings on the Halloween franchise?
I do have a soft spot for part 2.
I don't hate
like
part
you
2,
said,
but
it's not bad, but it is a retread of the first one. The first one's just so good, though. And so the retread, revisiting kind of the same territory, that felt okay to me. The fact that they skip over it for the David Gordon Green movies is pretty much fine with me. Because I've got the movie in my collection anyways. If I really get that nostalgic for it, I can just go back. Halloween 3, by the way, I will point out that Jamie Lee Curtis does appear
That's
in a
right.
voiceover.
She's the voice in The Factory.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you can see Michael Myers in it too, because I think it's in a bar. There's an advertisement for the movie Halloween playing on TV.
Nice, yeah.
But she doesn't come up again until part 7, which
that's right.
Almost seems like an accident. It seemed they were putting together Halloween 7 already. And that's them being the disgusting Weinstein brothers.
Yeah.
And Mustafa Akkad were already working on part 7, and it was going to be a direct-to-video movie, and there wasn't going to be anything particularly special about it. It was just to cash in. Then Jamie Lee Curtis was having dinner with John Carpenter and Deborah Hill, who Deborah Hill was the producer on Halloween. And she said, it's 20 years. We're coming up on 20. Let's do something, guys. Let's do something for the fans. And everybody was on board, and it sounded really exciting. And she went and talked to probably Mustafa Akkad, I'm assuming. And suddenly when Jamie Lee Curtis came on board, it was no longer a direct-to-video movie. They completely redid the script. Kevin Williamson came in and did some rewrites, especially on the teenage dialogue. And then promptly John Carpenter suddenly got busy. Then Deborah Hill suddenly got busy. And Jamie Lee Curtis was left holding the bag.
And, she says, I think she's on record as saying, like, she's upset that she wasn't a producer on the movie because it was literally her idea. She was like, hey, it's 20 years. Let's fucking do this. Which I give her a lot of credit for, too, because at that point, after Terror Train, she was basically like, no more horror. I'm not doing horror. And she stuck to her guns, but also smart enough to say, like, hey, this is a special movie. This is a special opportunity. Let's fucking do this. And I give her mad props for that.
I do too. And the movie is not as bad as some of the other Halloweens. They properly ignore that 4, 5, and 6 ever happened. It kind of takes place after part 2. Well, not directly after. It's still 20 years since the first night. And they removed some of the stink of the sequels. They kept the fact that they were siblings, which is kind of weird.
Yeah. But that's become such a prominent part of the mythology. But
I don't think they kept it in the new one.
No. Because again, they're throwing out. Yeah, David Gordon Green was just like, let's go back to fucking square root. Let's go back to the first movie. I think the bitterness that Carpenter had about not even wanting to make a sequel for like film nerds, they've heard that and they're like, they hold Carpenter's word as like basically gospel. So I think David Gordon Green and Danny McBride. So, but yeah, I'm sure that when they were creating the script, they were very much, knowledgeable about Carpenter's opinions about the franchise and stuff, and wanted to be like honor his word and go like, the only thing that counts is the first one. Let's fight. And they revisit themes that happen in H2O. I mean, H2O touches upon that like post-traumatic stress, that survivor's guilt, and that like trauma that you would have if you were fucking stalked by a slasher. Like, so, but I mean,
yeah, but they made some huge mistakes in that script too, though. I mean,
oh no, that's what I'm saying. The movie there's definitely faults with the movie. It's fun, I guess, but like, the thing is, again, though, when that movie's coming out, H2O, I'm like, fuck, let's do this. And when I first saw it, all I saw was the faults. So that's why even if the years I can sort of appreciate it for what it is, I still hold the bitterness because what I was looking for was what we kind of got with H2 with the 2018 home. So
yes, we saw in the 2018 Halloween, we saw Jamie Lee Curtis's character Laurie Strode kind of go into full Sarah Connor mode, where she was just as much strengthened as she was victimized by her whole circumstance, and she was ready to fight. She was ready to throw down, and there was some of that in H2O. First
but
off,
not the same.
The whole idea that in H2O she has faked her own death so that she can hide under assumed name, but her chosen hiding spot is as the headmistress of a all-girls school or something like that. It was not my place to hide out, really.
No, not the most low-key,
Yeah, and what did she do? Did she get a degree in this other name? Because otherwise, how do you become a headmistress of a school?
That's a good point.
None of that made sense. And apparently Jamie Lee was talking to, I don't know if it was the director or the writer of H2O, and saying, I want her to be more scrappy. I want her to dealing with this in a more realistic way, and for her to really be suffering as the movie starts. And he said, well, we've got to give her something to fight for. We have to get her to a point where she no longer has anything to lose, and that's when she goes nuts. And I think that was a mistake. I think that Jamie Lee's instincts were correct, and that is what they did in 2018. And when you find her, she is full on badass.
Yeah, but at the same time, she's full on trauma. I mean, she is a broken person. She's an addict. Like all of her relationships have fallen apart. She can't control her anger, and that's fucking very much understandable. That's a character I can get behind, because like, how do you? When I see, there are people who've survived really crazy stuff, and when you see them on like Dateline or 2020 or Barbara Walters talking, and they seem very centered and very much like they've moved on with their life. Part of me is like, good for them. I'm happy for them. But part of me is like, I would be filled with rage if I had gone through that. Like, and they sort of go with that. But again, what Jamie Lee Curtis, or what Laurie Strode goes through in Halloween, nobody's dealt with that. Nobody has felt a presence like The Shape. Nobody has fought something unkillable in that way, and something that's a relentless killing machine. So yeah, I think it was great, and I think everything about the design, people shit. There are definitely people out there that do not like the 2018 Halloween, and it's not perfect. It's far from a perfect movie, but there are so many smart decisions in the movie. Cinematically, there's that tracking shot of when Michael Myers kind of goes in that backyard and then goes in the house, and just brilliant, and feels just like Carpenter's Halloween. So yeah, I mean, I'm a fan, and I'm excited for the subsequent two. But again, I think that movie, it proves that Jamie Lee Curtis is a badass, and she plays basically, a completely different version of Laurie Strode, like the polar opposite almost version of Laurie Strode. Her innocence is gone, her youth is gone, but there's definitely Laurie Strode is in the same, like it's the same character, but 40 years later, and it's a really phenomenal performance, and again, I think anchors the whole movie. So
I agree. And before this becomes the Halloween show, we probably should move on a little bit here.
Yes, I'm ready to.
I don't know if you wanted to say anything about Prom Night, but I do have an alternate casting trivia bit about Prom Night that is kind of fun.
Let's hear it.
All right. Until Jamie Lee Curtis was interested in the role was already in the hands of actor Eve Plum, who people might maybe recognize as that was Jan Brady on the Brady Bunch.
I think I have heard that, yeah.
How different would that have been had Jan Brady been the star of a slasher movie, one that has been proven to be a successful slasher movie, although that could be because of Jamie Lee Curtis's name. It may not have had the same reputation.
Absolutely. I can see that.
But just supposing it had, I'm willing to bet that we would have seen Eve Plum go on and do at least more horror stuff. I don't think she would have had.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I almost feel bad for. Yeah, I almost feel bad for poor Eve Plum, because I mean, it could have been a really good opportunity.
No, it went to Jamie.
That poor Brady cast.
Jamie.
Well said, Devin. If you get that, you are definitely
old
like us, old men like us.
But before we get to the non-horror stuff, and she's not the lead in this movie, but I think it's worth mentioning because it's a really good movie that if you haven't discovered it yet, it's worth looking up, and that's Road Game with Jamie Lee Curtis and Stacey Keach.
I almost forgot. Yeah.
Road Games is really, I guess you could say it has some elements of Duel. It's like Duel meets Rear Window.
Yep, exactly.
We're into the Hitchcock realm again. But it's like, what do you do when you're a truck driver and you think you witness a murder while you're on your route? And then the truck that you think might be the murderer is suddenly following you. It's a really stressful movie in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and it was at a time first off, there's something to the Australian outback. Mm-hmm. There's very few kind of like untamed areas of the world, and the Australian outback is one of those. And it was a time when Australia was making a bunch of interesting movies, at least films set in Australia. There was a lot of but it's a weird movie, like you said. Stacey Keach. It's definitely. I've always loved Stacey Keach, but he's so particular. He's so Stacey Keach.
He is. When you need a Stacey Keach type, you can still go and get a Stacey Keach type. He's still out there. He's still working.
That's right.
Just seeing
God.
him makes me happy. His movies aren't always all that great, or whatever TV show he might happen to be in, from one season to the next. But I'm still always so happy to see Stacy Keach.
I think every year his lip recedes further and further up to into his gums. No offense, Stacy Keach. But yeah, it's a great movie. It's a very underrated movie. I haven't seen it. I think we talked about it before, but I haven't seen it in a few years. But I remember seeing it and being like, damn, this is a very, like you said, very tense, very like suspenseful, as I said, it's people call it like a horror movie. Like I said, it's definitely more of a thriller, I would consider, but
yeah, but his paranoia starts to become surreal, and I think that's where people get the horror element.
It's surreal, yeah.
It actually
that's true. That's a good point.
Visually different as he gets more and more paranoid.
More paranoid.
The road plays tricks on him. He starts to see things, and it's a strange little film. But
yeah, it is
definitely worth your time.
I'm glad you brought that up. I because I know we talked about it even before we started doing this, but I would have completely forgot about it. So.
And Jamie Lee Curtis is the hitchhiker that he picks up along the way, who at first you think maybe somehow in on it. Then you realize that she's kind of interested in what Stacy Keach is doing too. And this is kind of where it becomes the road games of the title. Yeah. They're trying to basically figure out, who did this person kill? Why did they kill him? This is while they're chasing the guy on a very long stretch of highway in Australia. Yeah. And they have long enough to discuss, what's more important, his reason for doing it, or, where he's going to put the body. These debates back and forth, and Jamie Lee Curtis plays the perfect hitchhiker. She's just a little bit out there, enough that you still don't know for a good long while whether or not she's one of the good guys or not. Yes. And of course, when she goes to investigate things and she disappears, and the bad guy truck is on the move again, she becomes central to Stacy Keach going crazy, because he doesn't know yet whether he trusts her and whether she is in need of help or whether she's helping the person.
She's in it, yeah.
So
yeah, the thing is, like,
part of that.
It's funny because it's one of those movies that I feel like I don't understand why it isn't more well known, because it's definitely more interesting even in some films from that same era, and well acted. So like it's one of those movies that sort of, those happen definitely where they really strong great movies sort of fly on the radar, but it's like, yeah, why isn't this a more well known movie? But that's life, I guess. But I feel like every time we talk, I'm like, I need to own that movie. I need to go buy that movie.
I need to buy Road Games too.
My film libraries.
I rented it online. I couldn't find it anywhere on subscription, but there is a Shout Factory collectible edition, because of course there is.
I was going to say, yeah. In fact, I even remember the cover. So yeah, that's right.
And for anybody outside of the United States, I think there's an Arrow version as well. But
of course there is.
It's
if it's not, yeah. That's why, there's a ton of great, we've talked about several different sort of boutique, film, distributors that are putting out really good, especially collector's edition DVDs and Blu-rays. But I think fucking Arrow is consistently killing it. Yeah. In fact, I'm sad that I'm not, I don't have more money every month to spend on Blu-rays and DVDs, but c'est la vie. But yeah, it's a great movie. But let's get into the movie that I think everybody's waiting for us to talk about. 1985's Perfect. No, I kid. Let's talk about Trading Places. It was definitely probably the second most important film in her career, because it was the most legitimate movie at that point. She did get it because she worked on Coming Soon, I think, right? So
yes,
I think
which was directed by Landis, and she didn't really know much about Landis. And Landis, of course, was known more for frat humor at that point. He had done Animal House, and then he did an American Werewolf in London. Which was different from anything else still that he's ever done.
Yeah.
But then comes Trading Places, which capitalized on two of Saturday Night Live's greatest successes, which was Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy. And Jamie Lee Curtis was the third part of that sandwich there. And Landis had to fight to get her. He believed in her so strongly. Yeah, and the studio was just like, no, she's a horror actress. People won't accept her in a comedy. And man, they were wrong. She was great. She plays different characters within the movie. She's one character in the movie, but her character goes into disguise. And
exactly. It's the whole thing. It's like a con game kind of thing. Yeah. Great. Obviously, I'm sure if you're listening to this podcast, Trading Places, you've seen Trading Places, you probably love Trading Places. It's a great movie, and, definitely a very young Eddie Murphy, just fucking killing it. And of course, Dan Aykroyd. I love Dan Aykroyd. But yeah, Jamie Lee Curtis as the the hooker, the
you can say hooker with the heart of gold.
I don't know how to say it. Is this PC? But yeah, she's fucking great.
We're talking about Trading Places. We're just going to have to not let PC be a thing here, because this is a movie that has a very serious, huge, long blackface sequence in it. So
yes, it does.
Let's just put that out there.
That's very true. Yeah, but
are probably being more responsible to let you know before going into this movie that you will see Dan Aykroyd doing a horrible Jamaican.
Terrible. I'm like, yeah, like, I mean, it wasn't even good at the time. Like, I mean, it was.
I was cringing even as a kid.
Yeah, same. But
the rest
it's
of the movie.
I mean, it's funny because I was just having a conversation about how, like, you know, certain films don't age. Like, I was talking recently about Christopher Guest movies and how the other day I watched all of the films he's directed specifically, and then Mask Off. But I watched all of his films. And I love, Best in Show. I love that movie. It's a great movie. Everything about it's really good. I'm sorry, no, I did watch Best in Show, and it is a great movie, and I do love it. But talking about A Mighty Wind, I'm watching the movie and I'm really enjoying it. But then I remember that it has this very kind of transphobic portion of the film. But kind of one of the gags ends on is, look at the crazy trans guy singing folk music, and it hasn't aged well, and it's unfortunate. But the one thing that we have to realize in life is that, despite those things, it's good that we recognize, eventually we come to a place where we recognize it. But we also have to understand when these films are made, they're going with like sort of, what is the public consciousness at the time? Like, they didn't realize how offensive they were being. Should they have considered the feelings of trans people? Yes. But again, it's, things are a different time. Right now we think like these young kids, and we're very much about a progressive movement. 20 years from now, things that we're doing right now that like the most, forward-thinking progressive people, we're going to do something that some kid 20 years from now is going to be like, oh, that's terrible. What were you thinking? So it's going to happen. But unfortunately, yes, blackface is definitely one of the more glaring ones.
Yeah. But, and by the way, just to note, you realize the irony of pointing out a Christopher Guest movie here as an example of
yes. This. Well, no, I was gonna. Yes, yes, Mr. Jamie Lee Curtis. Yes. Which still boggles my mind to this day.
Well, apparently Jamie Lee Curtis was with Deborah Hill, the producer of Halloween. Because like I said, they were very close. And they were flipping through Rolling Stone, and Jamie Lee Curtis saw a picture of Christopher Guest in This Is Spinal Tap.
Yeah.
And she literally said, I'm going to marry that guy. And 5 months later, she did. It was that fast. It just moved. As soon as she saw his picture in costume in This Is Spinal Tap.
Well, that's the thing is.
Point out.
Yeah. Dude, well, I mean that's the thing is though, because I don't know for the people who are listening to this movie, or listening to this podcast, excuse me, if if you're familiar with Christopher Guest and who he is and what he looks like, but Nigel Tufnell is a cool looking dude. Like, he's that definitely classic 80s kind of, hard rock metal guy, but it looks kind of cool. But Christopher Guest outside of that costume looks nothing like that. He's a very weird, kind of quirky, nerdy kind of dude, like, and it's just when you see them together, and obviously as he's aged, it's gotten, he's more and more kind of this weird, awkward, nerdy looking guy. But yeah, it's very, very interesting. Like I said, and unfortunately, like, despite all the roles he plays, whenever I hear Christopher Guest, I think Corky from
Waiting for Guffman.
Waiting for Guffman. So,
yes.
Which is the exact opposite of Nigel Tufnell. So, but anyways, but yeah, interesting very interesting, and they've lasted forever. They've been together for decades. So
one of the few Hollywood love success stories, I've got to say, and both of them, they're very upfront about the idea that it's never perfect. It's just the idea of staying in and not giving up on each other. And they've seen each other through a lot of shit. She's very open about times she's messed up. She had a painkiller addiction, and she was an alcoholic as well for many years. And she said that she was so functioning on it that her husband had no idea. But for 10 years, she was an alcoholic and a pill popper. Turned it around and got herself healthy, started eating the right kind of yogurt. And
helping her poop, doing her thing.
Right. But yeah, it all goes back to that era. I was going to point out right around the same time of Trading Places, by the way, she did a movie called Love Letters that I've never seen.
I have not seen it either.
She did it just before Trading Places, and it was the one where she really did go on record saying, I don't want to do horror movies anymore. So this was technically her first non-horror movie. It just wasn't a big mainstream hit, but it was directed by the woman that went on to direct Slumber Party Massacre, who was also apparently trying to take a break from the kind of film she was trying to make at that time. So I should check it out. It does not have very good reviews, but maybe it's one of those ones that will sneak up on us. Called Love Letters, came out in 1983, but talented director, talented actor, it could work.
I'll watch it. I'll try anything once, I guess.
Sure. I just don't know that much about the woman that directed Slumber Party Massacre, and I just dig that movie.
The thing is, she's a feminist, and she's actually a really interesting person. You actually should read some interviews with her or see some interviews. Especially at that time, like she was a very interesting person, and it's unfortunately her career didn't launch, and she didn't go off to have the sort of success that other burgeoning filmmakers from that career might have had. But I love it. I talk about that movie all the time.
So beyond that, okay, for Trading Places, fantastic movie. There is a bit of a dry spell here where it's not so much that she's not working, it's just the films aren't working. Stuff like Perfect with John Travolta, things like that were just really kind of just seem like paycheck movies. And I don't know whether that's just because she wasn't getting the offers or what was going on there. She should have been getting a lot more offers for more interesting films at that period of time. I know that there's also, when I imagine movies like Perfect, I can imagine cocaine possibly being a factor in that movie getting produced. There might have been things like that.
Let's not actually go too Perfect. It's not, I barely remember. I saw it at the time, of course, but it was definitely a movie that, for a young James, that kind of stirred some feelings in a young me. I think it's still one of the greatest. That whole aerobic scene is incredible.
It was
a lot of it just because
as a movie.
Exactly. Yes. Exactly. But that scene is especially rewatchable, not just because Jamie Lee Curtis is very attractive in that scene, and she's actually a very convincing aerobics instructor, but it's fucking John Travolta's ridiculous facial reactions while also doing like these pelvis thrusts and gyration. It's an insane scene. Definitely, I remember seeing it as a young man and being I was at that age when things were starting to the world was starting to change. Anyways, definitely has a specific place in my heart, but otherwise a pretty fucking forgettable, terrible movie. But anyway.
Right. But in 1988, John Cleese wrote A Fish Called Wanda for her specifically, which is that's when you've made it as an actor. When people are writing parts like Fish Called Wanda. Specific. That's, you've done good if you're getting to that point.
Absolutely. No, I mean, I think she even says I don't know if she says it's her favorite movie, but obviously it's one of her favorite movies she's ever done. That fucking
Wouldn't
cast.
Surprise me, yeah.
How do you not enjoy that cast and filming that movie? Very, I remember the time, it was a movie that was sort of out of my age range at the time, obviously. But I just remember being everywhere. It was super popular. Everybody was talking about it. For a long time, I think it was sort of considered one of the best comedies in a long time. So
it was reaching achievements that comedies don't normally reach. I mean, Kevin Kline won an Oscar for it. Comedies don't win Oscars. And
exactly.
Fish Called Wanda was winning. It's just it's a perfect heist movie. It's a perfect comedy. I even somehow I don't know how it's possible, but they make me believe that Jamie Lee Curtis and John Cleese can have a love affair. It just works, and she is really the pin that holds it all together. There's so many great performances, but everybody has kind of got something wrong with them. I mean, Kevin Kline is playing a sociopath. Michael Palin's obviously very flawed. Everybody in the gang is very flawed, almost to cartoonish levels. And in the middle, you've got Jamie Lee Curtis and John Cleese kind of being real people and falling for each other in the middle of all this lunacy. But there is something kind of cool about Jamie Lee Curtis versus all these con men, because with all the con men and thieves in that movie, she's the one that plays every single other person.
Yep, exactly.
There's not a single person in there that she's not lying to for herself to get ahead, and she just nails it. It's perfect.
It's very, and that's the thing, is she definitely, because again, she was, even despite doing a very successful comedy like Trading Places, it wasn't like she was considered this genius comedian at that point. And it was that movie, I think, and again, it's a movie that's it's all about dialogue. It's like very much like verbal sparring throughout the whole movie. It's very much like a With Nail and I, or like, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, where it's the whole movie is really just about characters interacting and the dialogue and the like very witty arguments and insults they get into with each other and stuff. And she's fucking amazing in it. So again, definitely when you watch it, it definitely feels like it was written for her. So good on John Cleese for having that foresight and writing the part for her. But yeah, it's and it's weird because it's one of those movies that you, like I said, obviously, you just said like it was a very well regarded film at the time. But I feel like it's a film that's and it's been a while. To me, it doesn't feel that long ago because again, we're old. But it's a movie now. If I bring up, a lot of people, even people our age, haven't seen. So I'm like, how have you not seen Fish Called Wanda? But it was a great movie.
It should be on a must-watch list. It needs to be on everybody's must-watch list. I
agree 100%. It was a movie, like I said, my mom. It was one. She loved the movie. So I think that's probably where I was most exposed.
My mom loves that one too, and it actually does still hold a record for the longest climb to the #1 spot at the U.S. box office. I don't know the exact number of weeks. There have been several movies that were very successful but didn't open at #1, but I think it took like 2 or 3, maybe even 4 months for this movie to be released and to finally reach #1, which is something that would never happen nowadays. That movie was given a chance just by nature of being an 80s movie that a similar movie wouldn't be afforded in today's age, because we would be like, okay, we've got to clear out that theater and put in Jurassic Park 5.
Yeah.
I think there is something about that. I think that's why you won't see something like Fish Called Wanda come around. I'm not going to say you'll never see something like that again.
Well, I mean, you'll see. There's always going to be those weird, the like French silent film one that came out a few years ago.
The Artist
and stuff. You'll see it's those like, I feel like those like ones that sort of come out of nowhere. But I mean, yeah, I mean, that's a great point. It's why like you'll never get another, the season finale of MASH, because there's just too much competition. Like it's just, we live in a different age. There's too much content at this point. But yeah, and that, I mean, the thing is, I think we're that exact age where we have the feet in both those worlds, where we definitely remember growing up with only a few stations on TV, even pre-cable, because at a point, when HBO first came out, it was very expensive. Most people couldn't afford it. But we remember that. But we also live in this world and are very comfortable with this world of streaming and on demand and all these different platforms for streaming entertainment, movies, and TV. I'm as a film fan and as like a fan of the art of television and cinema, like I'm happy because there's always some great stuff to watch. But I feel like we don't hold on and have the same reverence for newer, like if you're constantly moving on. Like I used to, like, again, I know you're the exact same way. I probably watched the movie Tremors 200 times in my youth, like, and then that's not an exaggeration. I watched it constantly. We'd fucking rewind the VHS and then just replay it. That doesn't happen anymore just because there's so much to choose from. And I feel like you won't. Yeah, I sort of missed that. Like I feel like there's so much fucking forgettable content. I mean, just by the law of averages, a lot of stuff comes out, but the majority of it's forgettable. So, anyways, it's a weird tangent, but yeah, you make a great point though, and it's a very interesting.
And to continue on to that, there's a forgotten movie from a couple years after Fish Called Wanda, Blue Steel.
Blue Steel. I was hoping you were going to talk about Blue Steel. Yes.
I remember when Blue Steel came out in the theater. It wasn't something as a 6th grade boy that I was ever going to go see. I saw it later on, but it's a tough little movie at times. Yep. It almost becomes sort of like a Dirty Harry sort of thing where she's not quite following the rules, but it's solid. It's I don't know quite how to describe it. It's directed by Catherine Bigelow,
a young
Hurt Locker, and she does a very good job in this. Jamie Lee Curtis plays a brand spanking new police officer. In fact, you get the feeling that this was her first night on the job, and while her partner's taking care of something else personal, she ends up seeing a grocery store robbery at gunpoint. She goes in to stop it and ends up having to draw her weapon and fire on the person who is holding up the store. First appearance, by the way, of Tom Sizemore. Not entirely sure if they just found Tom Sizemore actually robbing a grocery store at that point in time and just said, no camera.
Is it really? I didn't know it was Tom Sizemore's first movie, but that's
Tom Sizemore's first movie. And the gun goes missing. The Tom Sizemore's gun goes missing. So when she's reporting back to her bosses at precinct and trying to explain her reason for using lethal force, they're saying the guy was unarmed. And what they don't know is that the gun was stolen by Joel Silver. What was his name? It's not Joel Silver.
Ron Silver.
Ron Silver.
The poor man's
poor man's Pacino.
Yeah, he always looks like poor man's Al Pacino to me.
God bless him. He's gone now, unfortunately, but he plays a really good psychopath in this movie.
Yes.
And he's stolen her gun, and he becomes kind of obsessed with her, and other people start being killed around the city, and the bullet casings have her name etched into it because he's obsessed with her. So, of course, she ends up being stuck in the middle of this investigation in a very misogynistic police force that probably is just as interested in seeing her fail as they are in saving her life. So there's a lot of dynamics going on here. I will say that the movie is brought to a dead stop in the last three quarters when she ends up partnered up with Clancy Brown, who does not like her at first, which is fine. Whenever Clancy Brown appears in a movie, I expect him to not like whoever is the lead character.
Exactly. That's the most succinct description of Clancy Brown's career.
He's very talented. He plays a douchebag really well.
Yeah.
And I've heard he's really nice in real life, so that just...
Oh, Clancy Brown owns a T-shirt I've drawn.
How awesome is that?
I drew a T-shirt of Kurgan for this lovely company called Atomic Cotton, and somebody online posted a picture of him holding it. So it's a special pride of mine because I'm a huge Clancy Brown fan and a huge Highlander fan. So anyways, just had to throw that out there, some self-promotion.
No, absolutely. No, congratulations on that. That's amazing. I love Clancy Brown.
Exactly. He plays this gruff a-hole.
Well, he's an a-hole through this whole thing, but then they end up having this really particularly bad night where both of them are almost killed by the psycho. And he takes her back to her apartment so that she can finally get some rest, and hopefully they can catch the psycho tomorrow. And in just pure 80s fashion, as police partners, I'm sure do, they're so stressed out they just have to have sex.
Yeah.
And it's the worst love scene.
It's so awkward.
It's so nothing against Clancy Brown. I just don't see anybody, having a bad enough day to be like, yeah, sure, come on, Clancy.
Usually it's the same way I feel about Nick Nolte. Like, who's fucking Nick Nolte?
It cheapens it. It cheapens it because there wouldn't have been that dynamic if it wasn't about a female police officer. I fully believe that. And I don't think that Catherine Bigelow, I could almost feel Catherine Bigelow screaming as she's directing this scene. That was probably enforced upon her by whatever male producer it was. But it takes you right out of the movie, right as the movie's about to get suspenseful again. And it never quite recovers from that. So I won't blame the movie because I don't think it's the movie's fault. I'm willing to bet there was some douchebag in a tie in a higher up office who said they had to have that scene.
Yep, I agree 1,000%.
But if you ever get a chance, Blue Steel, it's out there and it's better than you think.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm very glad we touched upon it because it was definitely a movie that... again, going very against type, female director, female-led thriller, which, again, at that point in 1990 was very rare, and Jamie Lee Curtis is perfect in it. Catherine Bigelow, even at that point, is a very capable director. Yeah, it's a good movie. It's a very good movie. I never thought about it before, but yes, I absolutely do agree. It sort of does lose steam at that point, again, it's very even the scene feels like it sticks out like a sore thumb even through the rest of the tone of the movie. So I agree 110%.
Yeah, didn't need to happen. Soon after that, she did My Girl, which again she was a supporting character, but a rather important one, and I put her back with Dan Aykroyd, which is kind of cool.
So I'm going to go on full disclosure. At this point in Jamie Lee Curtis's career, there's a lot of films I haven't seen. One of those actually does include My Girl. I probably did see it at the time when it came out, maybe when it came out to rent. If I did, I just know a few of the well-known sequences and stuff, and I know what the movie's about. I can't recall specifics. And at this point, too, a lot of her movies, like her big successful movies, at this point, she sort of now is transitioning into playing more of a matriarchal type of character. She's kind of playing more, not middle-aged, but, like I said, more motherly aged characters. And a lot of the big movies at this point, I have not seen, not out of any malice or ill will. It just maybe movies that didn't come up on my radar. But there goes a long period at this point where I have not seen her film. So I'll let you sort of take it from here because again, a lot of this is going to be new to me.
Well, she had a couple of clunkers around that time, and she had a couple of successes too. I will say with My Girl, I distinctly remember My Girl because it was one of my first dates when I was young.
Oh,
I want to say it was maybe a little bit older than the kids in the movie, but I was so young that it was a chaperone date. So, it wasn't like we were making out in the back of the theater. It was still when we were giggling and holding hands. But I remember when, I don't know whether to spoil it, but
spoil.
For people who have seen My Girl, you know that there's a thing that happens towards the end.
With the bees.
With the bees. And I remember my girlfriend at the time, my first girlfriend, running out of the theater, acting like she had to find the bathroom real quick or whatever. And I was not putting it together that she was running out there to cry. I just kept watching the movie, and then about 5 minutes later went out and found her. What's wrong? Nothing. She wouldn't even let me look at her. She just did not want me to see her crying at My Girl, and that will immediately be the first thought in my head when I think of My Girl. But it's a sweet movie. It's a coming of age movie, which again, there's a lot of those for boys, not as many for women.
Absolutely.
And I think it does a good job of that. My Girl 2 is not nearly as good. But the first My Girl's cute. Anna Klumsky is more than capable of carrying the movie. Macaulay Culkin really could have been anybody. Wasn't necessarily his shining moment. Jamie Lee Curtis and Dan Aykroyd made a cute couple. Jamie Lee Curtis has gone on record as saying that Dan Aykroyd was her best on-screen kiss, and she's gone back to that well a couple of times. So I'm willing to believe that. And yeah, just wanted to kind of throw out My Girl there for that story about one of my first dates.
Yeah, I mean, it's a definite. I mean, it's one of her exactly, and it was a good story.
It's a sweet movie to me.
But yeah, it's one of her more well-known movies, and definitely one of her bigger movies. So in fact, I don't even think I knew there was a My Girl 2 until like 5 years ago. I mean, like, what didn't she die at the end of this movie?
I think there's people that are in My Girl 2 that are just finding out that My Girl 2 is.
But yeah, so for me, it would go another few years before I would see another one of her movies. A very big movie, but I'll let you, like I said, feel free to talk about whatever film in her filmography you want. But
I think just to mention Forever Young, because it was a huge hit, but I'm not really in the mood to discuss anything where Mel Gibson's the love it.
Yeah, and that's the thing is I think I remember portions of it. I think I remember a baby Elijah Wood in it, but yeah, I didn't know it was written by J.J. Abrams, but again, and it's a sci-fi movie. Like it's a
sci-fi movie in the same way that Somewhere in Time is a sci-fi.
That's
movie.
what I'm saying, exactly. Yeah.
By the way, to go on record, I love Somewhere in Time. That is one of my favorite time travel movies ever. Time travel movie without a time machine in it, and it's a great movie. Forever Young is about Mel Gibson is basically Captain America, I think. He's cryogenically frozen. And awakens in the 90s and falls in love with Jamie Lee Curtis, who I think might be the daughter of the woman that he was in love with, or something. My main memory of Forever Young was having to watch it because we were waiting for my friend's mom to finish it so that we could have access to the VCR so that we could watch Goodfellas for like the 5th time that weekend.
I love it.
So Forever Young to me is just a movie that you get through so that you can watch Goodfellas.
There you go. Perfect. Well said.
But let's go ahead and move on to the next big one, because it was another one where a really successful director wrote a part specifically for Jamie Lee Curtis, and that's True Lies.
That's right. Yep. And again, perfect. Absolutely perfect in the role. I'll be going on record as saying at the time, seeing her and Arnold Schwarzenegger together was very weird. And at first, I will say, for the first few times I watched it, their relationship, the fact that they would be married didn't sit with me. Because to me, again, Arnold Schwarzenegger's he's the least romantic leading man in the history of the.
It made more sense than Clancy Brown, James.
I don't know. I'm maybe. He has a better body than Clancy Brown, but I'll leave it there. But fucking, she's great in it. I remember seeing a thing with her a long time ago, and she talked about how it's the most fun she's ever had, or like she thinks it's like her favorite because her character is like a real person and she makes mistakes, but the character's so fun. One thing I will say right away is I feel like at that point it did definitely sort of, people kind of remember like, oh yeah, like, kind of remember, even though, like I said, she'd had hits at this point, like it was sort of like, she was like at that point, like kind of a big deal. Like she had sort of become like, much more in the public consciousness. I think a lot of that's to do with the dance scene, but
there's that. It was a great dance scene. I saw the movie a couple times in the theater, and I remember blushing during the dance scene.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, but again, it's what she's, I won't even be dismissive about that scene. That scene really does encapsulate so much about who she is, because she is a beautiful woman. She is a very sexy woman, but the character is awkward and weird and funny and clumsy. And that's what makes her so endearing as an actress, is that she can like be both of those at the same time. Like, and
she was never not believable in that movie. As unbelievable as some of the plot gets, as she's cartoonish as the villains are, she's completely believable.
Yep. That movie was surprising for two things. One, for, again, reigniting my love for Jamie Lee Curtis, and also it was the first really interesting Tom Arnold performance. But
the only it's Tom Arnold performance.
That's right. That's probably true. Yeah, I think you said it better. Yeah, she's great in the movie. I'll go on record as saying I'm not James Cameron's biggest fan. I think to me he kind of has that. He's definitely made amazing. I'm not saying he's not a talented director and then saying he hasn't made great movies, but I think he's one of those guys that he's more about serving his ego. I don't know. I don't want to.
I think Cameron has as much of a style as Wes Anderson or Tim Burton. I think that his style has been ripped off by people like Roland Emmerich and what's the guy? Armageddon. Michael Bay.
Yeah.
Those guys. James Cameron makes the kind of movies that those guys make, except for the James Cameron makes the good ones.
Yeah. So I will go. I think here's my problem. And this has been since I was like a younger man. The first Terminator movie is one of my favorite movies ever, and it is one of the most intense. And I'm going to say this: it is a horror movie. Yes, it is a sci-fi action movie, but it is a stalk and kill, unstoppable monster horror movie. That movie is frightening. To go from that to fucking Terminator 2, which is a fucking live action cartoon, which is so over the top. It's like a fucking 2-hour loud ass music video. I hate that movie. I know there's people listening to this right now losing their fucking minds, but it is the most dated movie. It's over the top. There's so many like continuity errors in it too. Like the movie drives me crazy, and I know people fucking love it, but I can't stand it. And and again, there are things I do like about it. And turning Sarah Connor from very much like almost like the 2018 Halloween, turning Sarah Connor from like this. I mean, she was still bad. I mean, Sarah Connor was still badass in the first Terminator, obviously.
And so was Laurie Strode in Halloween. But...
Exactly. But to take her from that to just a fucking badass like pull-ups machine. So there's things I do like about it, and it's fun. I think if anything, my hatred of Edward Furlong will never die. But anyway, so that's my thing is I feel like while he is a phenomenal conceptual artist, and he's made movies I do love, I think James Cameron never checked his own ego. He's a little bit in that Spielberg territory which I think Spielberg's better at actually pulling back his natural instincts sometimes.
Well, Spielberg's a genius.
I feel like yes.
Cameron's very good at what he does. I'm not sure if he's a genius. He gets a lot of credit for special effects, which is fair, but that's an element of making a movie, not movie making. And
that's where, and again, and I agree, and that's why he, throughout his career, to the point where we've reached where he's literally jumped well, not literally, but figuratively jumped the shark with Avatar, where it's not a movie, it's a 2-hour commercial for special effects. It's like it's a special effects reel, and who gives a fuck? I can't stand it. Anyways,
as far as I'm concerned, the good Cameron movies are Terminator, The Abyss, Aliens, and True Lies.
Yes, that exact 100%.
And for just those 4 movies alone, I can never truly talk shit on James Cameron, because that's 4 more movies than I've ever made that are absolutely great.
I mean, the thing is, again, those are 4 incredible movies. That's why I said it's hard. It's just, again, I think it's just like anything. Because again, I loved, Aliens and Terminator. I was a huge fan. Those were 2 of my favorite movies growing up, as any nerd of that era would agree. I think, again, the film he started to churn out after that, that's sort of being like, what are you doing? Like, go back to like tense, like structured,
Avatar put me to sleep. Terminator 2, I agree. I love that movie, but I pretty much love that movie for purely nostalgic reasons. I was 12 when it came out, and it was made for 12-year-olds.
Exactly.
And as a movie made made for 12-year-olds, it's fantastic. As a movie made for grown-ups, the effects are dated and the rest of the story just is goofy.
There's giant plot holes. The whole like liquid Terminator thing doesn't make any sense. Like, it's physically impossible. I know it's a science fiction movie, but when the rest of it's kind of rooted in some sort of believable science fictional concepts, a liquid metal that has no like sort of like, you know, processor, like it. Anyways, it does make sense. But with that said, getting back. True Lies is a great fucking movie. It's so much fun taking the concept of a secret agent and really turning it on its head. Also taking Arnold Schwarzenegger, who has always played this fucking badass machismo, killer, and he still plays that, but he plays like an inept kind of fumbling, insecure version of that, like where somebody he has these two disparate sections of his lives, and yeah, it's great. It's a great movie, and Jamie Lee Curtis is amazing in it. And I do think
without her, and she got to hang off of a helicopter herself. She refused to let anybody do that stunt. That was awesome.
I will always for the rest of my life, I will always remember the sequence when she drops the fucking Uzi and it just goes down the steps. One, because it's a very memorable scene. It's fun, and the way she reacts. But my whole thing every time watching it is, if that gun is going off as it's like circling, why didn't she get shot? But that's neither here nor there.
Because it's funnier that she didn't.
Exactly, because then I would be sad.
It was a screwball comedy in the middle of set in a 90s action movie, which was kind of a righteous thing to do.
I agreed, 100%.
And like you said before, she played those two parts within the story really well. Going from kind of a average everyday housewife to being this badass.
Agreed, 100%. This one's getting a little long. We should probably kind of start to at least. At this point, she's still made a ton of movies.
Well, at this point, I think we are getting to a natural end here. I'm not. The only reason I'm going to bring up the movie Virus in 1999 is because I love that Jamie Lee Curtis has actually gone on record when asked about Virus. Her quote exactly is, "It's a piece of shit." I admire that. She did Halloween Resurrection, where she's hardly in it, and the rest of the movie is just garbage. It's possibly terrible. The worst Halloween movie, because as bad as 6 is, at least 6 was ambitious in its badness. Halloween Resurrection wasn't even ambitious in its badness.
It's forgettable,
bad.
And what's memorable is not good. Yeah, it's terrible.
From there, we get into the next Halloween, which we've already talked about, and Knives Out. Let's end on a high note, I guess, with Knives Out. What did you think of that one?
I thought it was great. I think Rian Johnson's a very interesting filmmaker. I loved Brick when it came out. The conclusion of it, or as a sort of almost mystery thriller comedy thing, I do feel like the ending was maybe a little weak. But I think because it builds up so much, there's so much going on that it could go in different places. But it's a great movie, and Jamie Lee Curtis is perfect in the role. The whole cast, I mean, that's the one thing, that cast is fucking phenomenal. Sterling, yeah. And just watching Daniel Craig do a fucking foghorn leghorn Southern accent is so entertaining. But yeah, she's great. She plays that character to a T. She kind of looks in that movie very much the way she looks every day. In real life, she has this very kind of warm, almost motherly. In real life, she kind of reminds me of that kind of older, kind of maybe sexy, interesting, college professor.
Definitely sexy. She still looks like Jamie Lee Curtis. She will.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, I just don't want to objectify her, but she is. She's been a crush of mine for a long time. I find her very attractive. Even like I said, even to this day, I think the short white gray hair is very sexy. She normally has this kind of warm, motherly, sweet, funny kind. She's like your fun aunt kind of. But Knives Out, she's this bitchy, cold, sort of manipulative, greedy. So she's great in it.
Seems to be kind of her new slot that she's filling lately, because she does in the show Scream Queens. I don't know if you saw Scream.
Yes, I started to.
She's a cold bitch in that too.
Yes.
I'm just not a huge fan of Ryan Murphy in general. I kind of perpetually want to be, and find myself getting annoyed with it instead.
Oh my God, we could have a whole episode about this exact topic. Yes. Ryan, and again, he always does something. As soon as I hear what he's doing, I'm like, oh, that's very interesting. I want to see that. And then first off, he's terrible with ending things. His conclusions always fall apart. The endings are always fucking either ham-fisted or make no sense or just very disappointing. And the other thing is, all of his characters have the exact same voice. Everybody talks exactly the same way.
Yeah.
That is not a good thing, people. Like, Woody Allen can get away with it. Nobody else can get away with it. But yeah, but she's great in it. And I mean, I remember being at San Diego Comic-Con the year they announced it and seeing this big Mack truck go by that said Scream Queens, and which of course I go right to it. And, they're showing different people, and then they show Jamie Lee Curtis, and I was like fucking super excited about it because, Scream Queens, Jamie Lee Curtis, what the fuck is this? But once again, the actual show.
No, but
she's great in everything, so she was good.
She was good. She was good, but she's gotten into this sort of cold bitch mold that is.
She does it well.
It's kind of satisfying to see her. She's going to take everybody down when you see her pop up.
Yeah.
She's just great at it. And you're right. She is in person very much not like that. There was a really cool convention clip you can probably find, really touching actually, where a fan is talking to her in a Q&A at like a panel. I think it might have been for the last Halloween. And this fan is actually talking about how he was a victim of a home invasion. Somebody broke into his house and he had to fend for himself. And his mantra during that moment was, what would Jamie Lee Curtis do? What would Jamie Lee Curtis do? And he survived, obviously, to be there that day at the convention. But he wanted to thank her for inspiring him to not just give in and to survive during something real that happened like Halloween. And she got up and she was crying and she gave him a hug and she was just so touched by that. And I think that's who Jamie Lee Curtis is. She loves hearing stuff like that, loves knowing that she's touched people's lives, is probably somewhat blown away by the fact that she's a movie star, even though she is from movie star royalty.
Royalty, yep.
I don't think that she takes anything for granted. I think she's felt lucky every single day that she's thought about her achievements. I mean, I know she went through her rough patch. I know she went through her addictions. She never stopped being Jamie Lee Curtis. She was always awesome. She was always a shining example of what an actor can be. And I just can't say enough nice things about her. I think she probably should at some point win an Oscar.
I hope so. And like I said, for women in Hollywood, the older they get, those opportunities get less and less. You have, your one or two actresses, your Dame Judi Dench's, your Hellmans, at this point, your Meryl Streeps, who kind of get those roles, but, they get fewer and far between. But God bless, I would love to see her an Oscar. The last thing I'll say about her is, I think she's still a badass. I love that she's still very politically active. She's very, she's not afraid to share her opinions. I love watching her fucking shut people down on social media and hearing her fucking put people in their place. Because the one thing about she's a very witty, very intelligent, very sassy person. So I always enjoy her social media presence. And again, she's a badass and she's still out there doing her thing. God bless you, Jamie Lee Curtis.
All right, and that's probably a good enough spot to close things out. I will mention real quick, it does sound like she has been inspired to write and direct for some of her next projects.
Yes, I heard that too, yeah.
If Hollywood ever gets back on track, I look forward to that. I would love to see something that she directed. I'm surprised it's taken this long. She said she's been inspired by her collaborations with David Gordon Green and Rian Johnson, and I'd say that if those are her inspirations, she's probably going to be a great director.
I hope so, yeah.
And at this point, I do want to remind everybody to check us out on social media. We are Den of Sin. That is CIN as in cinema. Search Den of Sin Podcast on Facebook. And you can also find us on Twitter. We're Den of Sin with underscores between Den underscore. Is that what it is?
I don't even know. I forgot.
You know what? You can find Den of Sin on Twitter, everybody.
There you go.
And of course, you can find us and subscribe to us on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on Google Podcasts, and anywhere that you like to listen to your podcasts. And we do have a preview for the first time ever. We actually are going to tell you what we have decided to do for our next show. If Jim even remembers what
I do, because I think we forgot to kind of touch upon it, but obviously
I was saving it for now.
There we go. So unfortunately, the dearly recently departed Carl Reiner. So we're going to talk about the works of Carl Reiner because the man will always be an absolute legend, both professionally and personally. One of the few good people in Hollywood. People have never had a a bad word to say about him. So we're going to celebrate his work on our next episode.
And we're going to be talking about we're going to emphasize the films that he's directed.
Yes. Oh, there you go. Yes.
So because he performed quite a bit, and I think that's
Absolutely.
what a lot of people know him from. But he was a really fantastic director too.
Phenomenal director. Yes.
If you're a fan of his, then you already know what I'm talking about. And if you don't know Carl Reiner's directing career, I guarantee you that some of these are your favorite comedies of all time.
I was going to say, yeah, you definitely know his movies. So you just made me not know that he directed them. Yes.
Right.
Oh, Meathead.
No, Meathead was the son. And really, I'm sure we'll bring up Rob Reiner in the process of next week too.
Oh yes, what am I saying? Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, sorry. Yes, we're talking about his father. Yeah, sorry.
Yes, father of Meathead.
Yes, the older Reiner. Mel Brooks' best friend.
Yes, so we'll look forward to that. I'm looking forward to watching a bunch of Carl Reiner movies in the next couple of days. Thanks for joining me for another one of these, James. I'm sorry it took so long to get to it, and I'm glad the internet finally smiled on us this time.
Exactly. At least we had no technical difficulty, so it's a success in my book.
All right, everybody, tune in next time, and everybody stay safe, stay well.